Every week about this time, we talk politics, catching up with our reporter in Washington, D.C., Chris Castile. Good afternoon from the Oklahoman's video studio. I'm Dave Morris, and there is Mr. Castile. How are you, sir?
I'm good, Dave. How are you?
Doing quite well. Spring here in Oklahoma City. You were telling me spring there in Washington as well?
It looks like it has arrived. It was snowing 10 days ago, but 70 and beautiful today.
You can't beat that. And your Nationals are playing some pretty good baseball.
Bryce Harper, two grand slams already, 7 home runs already. So we haven't played any good teams yet. It's been the Braves, the Phillies, and the Marlins pretty much. So we'll see, but it looks promising.
Yeah, so does Bryce Harper, as you mentioned. He looks like the real deal.
Yeah, MVP.
All right, one of the things you've been covering this week, Senate Judiciary hearings. Fill us up, or catch us up to speed on what you've been doing.
Right, Dave. That was actually this morning. The 2 judicial nominees for federal judgeships in Oklahoma City, which those judges cover the entire West. Hear cases from Western Oklahoma, the entire western half. Suzanne Mitchell, who's a U.S. magistrate judge now at the federal courthouse in Oklahoma City, and Scott Polk, former federal prosecutor who's now an assistant dean at the OU Law School. They were nominated by President Obama in December for these federal judges. And this is the lowest on the 3 levels of federal judges. These are called district judges. And considered non-controversial, these 2, absolutely non-controversial. Senator Jim Inhofe and Senator James Lankford both support them. But still, it was over 4 months before they finally got a hearing. And they had a hearing this morning with nominees from Massachusetts, Utah, and Maryland as well, which is also a sign that they're non-controversial, that they would put all 5 of these judges, on a single panel to all be interviewed at once, and it's fairly routine. So very, very very impressive resumes for both of these Oklahomans, and the hearing went quite well this morning, and I caught Senator Lankford out in the hall after he presented them and endorsed them to the Senate Judiciary Committee. I said, you think they're going to get out of committee? You think they're going to be approved by the full Senate? He said yes on both counts. So we'll see. There's been obviously the Supreme Court vacancy created by the death of Antonin Scalia, and then the nomination of Merrick Garland has made a lot of people aware of how the White House and the Senate work on this judiciary, confirmation process. That most of the public is probably not paying attention to for the lower levels, the federal appeals court and the district judges like this. I mean, I am, because I've had other presidential election years where I've been covering an Oklahoma nominee who was getting stalled because of the election year. It happened big time in 2012. So there's, everybody knows that the Republicans are not going to hear Merrick Garland's nomination. And most people believe that all the appeals court judges, and we don't have one pending from Oklahoma, but appeals judges for courts around the country are probably not going to get full, votes in the full Senate this year either, because they're important. They're a step below the Supreme Court. They often are the final word on, in cases. So the Republicans are going to use the same excuse about these judges, these circuit court judges, as they're using about the Supreme Court. Not going to give a lifetime appointment to someone, 8 months before the next president takes office or whatever. But there's still some chance that these district court judges, again, the lowest level, some of them will get through Congress before August. Probably they'd have to get through probably before July, actually. It's a very tight timeline that they're in now, because both of the conventions are in July. So Congress is probably pretty much done for the year in doing anything really before July 4th.
Chatting via Skype with Chris Castile. He's in Washington, D.C. at our sister newspaper, the Washington Examiner's, in Studio B, I believe.
That's correct.
We appreciate his time.
Given that designation.
That's right. Well, it is now, right? Senator James Lankford was fired up yesterday, however. You mentioned him earlier in your statement there. He was not too happy with some of the things going on with the Supreme Court nominee fight, and we have a soundbite of Senator James Lankford as he addressed that yesterday.
But we hit a new low today on this floor, Mr. President, and I had to come and address it. Because today, this moved from a conversation about is this the right time and is this the right person, to drawing in the memory of 168 lives that were lost in Oklahoma City 21 years ago today. April the 19th, 1995. Within 40 hours of that event occurring, a gentleman named Merrick Garland had come from D.C., where he worked in the Department of Justice, to Oklahoma City to help on the federal side of the prosecution, along with thousands of other people from around the country. Our state and our city was overwhelmed with the compassion of people around the country as we saw what happened. And Merrick Garland was one of those. We are grateful as a community for what he did in the prosecution of Timothy McVeigh, of what he did against Terry Nichols, of what he did against Michael Fortier. We are grateful for his work there. But today, on this floor of this Senate, the implication was laid out twofold. One is, since Judge Garland served the country and did that, he deserves something else. I've never met Judge Garland. I'll meet him next week and, quite frankly, look him in the face and say thank you for your service to Oklahoma. And to make it clear again, the same position we've been in before he ever started the process, there'll be no nomination this year. He does deserve our gratitude. He doesn't deserve a lifetime appointment onto the bench because of his faithful service to our country and our community, as is being alluded to. The politics of it really, really deeply struck me as an Oklahoman, that for some reason today, of all days, the tragedy that happened of 168 people and their death 21 years ago suddenly became paraded out here as a political prop.
That was Oklahoma's U.S. Senator James Lankford speaking on the Senate floor Tuesday evening. As he mentioned, he is scheduled to meet with Merrick Garland on April 27th. Chris, he was angry.
Yeah, it was quite an emotional speech. I mean, later on in that speech, when he starts talking about Bailey Almond, I think he had to stop a couple of times because he was really choked up. I was up in the Senate press gallery when Senator Patrick Leahy yesterday morning began giving a speech about the Oklahoma City, the anniversary of the Oklahoma City bombing, and had a huge enlargement next to him on the Senate floor of that, iconic picture of the firefighter with Bailey Almond. And I was like, well, I guess he's just, giving a speech about, the anniversary. Next thing I knew, he was talking about Merrick Garland and the Supreme Court nomination. And I was like, yikes. I don't want to step on, whatever Lankford, had to say about, but I was, let me put it this way. I was surprised that as that picture was being shown and as he was talking about the anniversary of the bombing, that he pivoted to the, bashing Republicans, and which he did, and which then three other Democrats, actually, Harry Reid, the Senate Democrat leader, had spoken before him, and then Patty Murray of Washington and Dick Durbin of Illinois. It's kind of a coordinated set of speeches talking about Merrick Garland's successful investigation and prosecution of the Oklahoma City bombing case, and then bashing Republicans for not giving him a hearing and a vote. And his role in Merrick Garland's role in the Oklahoma City bombing has been a prominent one, and as part of the White House campaign to get him confirmed for the United States Supreme Court. And Lankford just felt like this was a bridge too far to link it to the anniversary of the act itself with that picture. So he went to the floor of the Senate last night, and you saw part of the speech, but a lot of the speech wound up being about Senator Leahy using the picture of Bailey Almond and not naming her. That was something that Senator Lankford was really upset about, and I talked to him about it again this morning. It really offended him that Senator Leahy just referred to her as a toddler or something rather than naming her. As we know, she had just turned 1 the day before, and we all know the story. But for us Oklahomans, that picture has a lot of emotions attached to it, And Lankford just thought it was just really exploitative and beyond the pale politically.
It certainly did seem inappropriate, and those here in Oklahoma, that really does hit close to home. I want to pivot away for just a second onto another topic you wrote about earlier this week, a story you wrote about Anita Hill. And your reference at the beginning of your article, which was great, was when people ask you what was the story that means most to you. You referenced this Anita Hill, and that was an awkward setup, but I'll throw it to you to kind of explain what I'm talking about here.
Right, I often get asked that when I talk to like student groups, interns or journalism students. They want to know, well, what are some of the most interesting stories that you've worked on in your time there? And I've been here 26 years, and that happened in 1991. And I almost always name, and the Anita Hill hearings are almost always at the top of the list. I mean, they're just so explosive, so compelling, and so meaningful, still to this day. And I noticed, over the last probably 10 years, maybe, I'm trying to remember the first time I noticed I was asked to come speak to some Oklahoma interns who were here in Washington. And somebody asked me that question, and I noticed it's like they were all kind of nodding, with these blank looks on their faces. And it finally occurred to me that they don't know who Anita Hill is. That seemed inconceivable to me. Now I run into it so many times that I'm surprised if any millennials actually do know who she is. Maybe this HBO movie will be a starting place for some of them, but. And I don't really know who to, you don't know what you don't know. So I don't blame them for, if nobody told them or they just were not in any way, exposed to, that chapter in history. It's not their fault, but it strikes me as something that it's so recent. And especially if you're from Oklahoma, I wonder, maybe why it's not taught or told more.
Of course, what we're referencing is the HBO documentary. It is called Confirmation, and it came out April 16th about Anita Hill. Chris, I'll get you out on this. We have to ask about the New York primaries, Trump and Clinton with big wins. Does this kind of solidify them as perhaps the potential nominees?
Well, absolutely. I think, you and I have been talking for weeks. I've never been a big believer in the idea of a brokered convention. I've always thought it was just kind of a bunch of media talk. I mean, not just media talk. Cruz and Kasich and Republican officials talk about it, hopefully, but I've just never been convinced that that's going to happen. I'm still not convinced that's going to happen. I mean, elections are always about the people who are running. And, I don't know what states, how many states, how many delegates at this point, that Trump could win in each state. I don't, I think if he could win all of California and then pick off a portion of all, the bigger states, that he can actually get to the number. But it's not like it's between or among three really popular guys who, really, duking it out. It's not like it was Clinton, Obama. 2008, where that really was close for so long, and came down to the superdelegates on the Democratic side. This is not close. People don't love Ted Cruz or John. I mean, I guess John Kasich won Manhattan and Ted Cruz won nothing, yesterday. So it's not like, God, it's all they're trying to do is hold Trump below a certain number, and that's a weird strategy. And I've never been convinced that's gonna work, and that it's gonna go to Cleveland, and next thing you know, so and so is the nominee. I mean, it just strikes me still as absurd.
Looks like your perspective was right on the money. No surprise there.
Not yet. I mean, it could still happen. I'm just saying I'll believe it when I see it. Is how I feel about the whole brokered convention thing.
Hey, Chris, can I ask you, what are you working on for the weekend? Any big stories coming up?
None I want to discuss right now, but thanks for the opportunity.
I like it. Well, Chris is always working behind the scenes on stories, so plenty of coverage from Chris upcoming in the Oklahoman and online at newsok.com. Chris, enjoy that great weather in Washington. Catch a Nationals game if you can.
All right, Dave. Thank you so much.
Always appreciate catching up. Again, more political coverage from Chris can be found online at newsok.com.